All right, welcome to Conscious Construction, the Conscious Enneagram podcast. I'm Abby Robbins.
I'm Kimberly Culbertson.
And today we're talking about type 3.
Type 3, in relationship.
In relationship.
Excellent.
So we are starting with type 3, and we're going to move through 3, 6, and 9, so the types on the main triangle. And then we're going to continue our journey around the types by the harmony groups, which is a grouping in the Enneagram that we will talk about after we get through 3, 6, and 9. But we just thought it'd be nice to offer a different way of moving through the types. It seems like everybody starts with 8 and goes around the circle, or with 1 and just goes 1 through 9, or they try to go backwards. And so each season we're going to try and mix it up a little bit and offer a different order, just so poor 7s aren't always waiting
Always last.
Almost the very end.
It's good work for 7s to wait till the end.
Yeah, all that anticipation.
But I feel like when people are doing those really extensive type walks, by the time they get to 7, nobody cares anymore. And the person goes through it really fast.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it's been 4 hours.
Yes. Or it's been 3 days if you're in a workshop. So all that to say is we're going to mix things up so that you don't know what's coming next.
Yeah. So last season we went through the types by center. Mm-hmm. And this season we're going to go through them by harmony. And then we'll see what we do in the one after.
It's going to change.
Yeah.
It's going to change again.
It's going to change.
Yeah. So we're talking about type 3. And we're going to start off each one of these episodes with what the type does well in relationship.
Yeah.
And, I have to be really honest, and I think it's important. We've talked about this at other episodes in the previous season, to be really conscious of our biases. And I definitely have some hard past relationships with 3s. And so there's definitely there's a part of me that wants to be like, they don't do anything in a relationship well, which is definitely not true.
Not true.
Not true at all. But I just want to I want to kind of lay my bias out on the table and just let everyone know that this is something that I'm working with, because I've had some great relationships with 3s, and I've had some really challenging relationships with 3s. And sadly, those challenging relationships have left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah. And I think it's actually really important to note this around the circle, that sometimes we think, oh, I don't like this number.
Yeah.
And what it means is we had a negative experience with an unhealthy whatever that type is.
Or just a negative experience with somebody of that type, regardless of level of health. That's not, I don't think that, I think we are way too quick to label other people and our own behaviors as healthy or unhealthy, and I don't think that's a valuable thing to do.
Okay, fair.
But yes, what you're saying, the heart of what you're saying is absolutely true. It's what you're really saying is, I've had a bad relationship. I've had something go sideways with this type, and I've just shared, it left a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, because all of the types they're going to bring something excellent into relationship, and when they're not at their best, they're going to bring something detrimental to a relationship, all of us.
Yeah.
And with 3s, I think when we first met, I had never really been in close relationship with a 3, and the 3s I had encountered, I didn't enjoy much yet.
Yeah.
And now, fast forward to this season of my life, and 2 of my closest people are 3s, and they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so, I have all of this experiential, feeling in my body of positivity towards 3s because I'm in relationship with 2 people who are wonderful, who are also happen to be 3s. So be careful before you label the whole typology as bad in any number, really, or good, because you've had 1 or 2 experiences that are really intense. Yeah.
So all that said, I'm going to start off talking a little bit about what 3s do really well in relationship.
Yeah, bring it.
So 3s being in the heart center, they do take in the world from this kind of emotional place, and they are taking in the world kind of gauging relationships, and 3s want to be successful, and so they want to meet people's expectations. They want things to be good in their relationships, and so even without doing a lot of deep interpersonal work, 3s will show up to the work of relationship simply because they're motivated to be successful. That motivation isn't necessarily the most helpful thing for them, but they are very willing to show up to the work. of being quote unquote good at relationships,
Yeah.
whether that's a friendship or an intimate partnership, what have you. They're very willing to show up and to do that, and they're good at reading what that looks like for other people, right? They're very they can often do a better job of reading someone's emotions than the other person is. Like we see this in 2s and in 4s as well. There's this kind of inroad to the emotionality that the image types have that's can be really beneficial in relationships.
Yes, a lot of emotional intelligence, especially for what's happening in the room for 3s. Now, the 3s are in the heart center, like you said, but they're that anchor point, and the 3-6-9 triangle that we're going to start in, they're all the anchor points of the centers. And so that sometimes means that they have access to it, but not a full access. And for the 3, they sometimes aren't as aware of their own emotional experience. They discount it, they write it off, because they want to be successful and they don't know that their emotion is going to help them. But they're very tuned into how people are responding to them, which when you're in relationship with a 3, that can be a real asset because they're reading you. They're paying attention to how you're responding, and if what they're saying is not getting them the fruit that they're looking for relationally, then they're going to make a shift in how they're presenting because they're paying attention to how things are landing with you.
I think that phrasing is so valuable and so spot on for 3s, is that 3s are paying attention. They might not always respond the way you want them to, right? Because they're not responding from that heart-centered place, right? The dominant center isn't available for personal use.
Right.
But they are paying attention. And that is so valuable in a relationship, to have someone who's paying attention, because that's kind of the first level of like getting to know someone and actually like moving towards intimacy with someone, whether it's a friendship or whatever, is being able to pay attention.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And because the 3s are assertive, they're deeply invested in the success of the relationship.
Yeah.
Even if it's from their own, like, how does this reflect on me kind of motivation? They're invested in the relationship being successful, and they're going to move into action to make it successful. And so more than some types, when something is wrong, they're gonna move towards trying to fix it and change it.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah, definitely being in the competency triad with 1s and 5s, they are like, we need to find a solution.
Yeah.
And that, when so much of relationality and the way we connect with other people can be so overly heart-centered and overly mushy and floaty and all of these things that I don't really like. 3s can come in and they can speak that language and they can move in that way, but then they have this ability to say, well, here's the solution. And that's how a lot of people can get to the resolution that they need, is to have this solution presented to them, and 3s are great at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about where 3s can struggle in relationships.
Yeah.
So because the 3 is so interested in being seen as successful, in being admired, and being, having achievement, being the best at something, they can be highly competitive. Even though they're tuned into the relationship and they're invested in it, it may sometimes come across as if it's more about them than about us, whatever that relationship is, you know?
That's real funny. As you were saying, like, oh, they can be really competitive. Like, in my mind, I was like, oh, that's a tick in the plus column for me in relationship. Is like, I like that ability to like play off each other and like compete a little bit. And I've definitely seen how that's not helpful.
Right.
I think 3s really struggle in relationship if they believe the other person, whether it's a friendship, partner, whatever, if the other person isn't capable of meeting the 3's expectations. I think that's really hard for them. 3s have a picture of what they need to be successful, and it can be difficult unless a 3 is doing a lot of work to maintain relationships if the other person doesn't fit into the 3's picture of success.
Or if the other person is unable to contribute to the success.
Yes.
Because they're in a
that's
bad...
good. That's a good word. Yeah.
Because they're in a bad season, or because they're not wired for whatever the task is. I'm thinking about like work relationships.
Yeah.
Especially in work environments, because it feels so important for threes to thrive and to be seen as highly successful and highly capable. When they're partnered with people who just maybe don't even have the skill set, they can just like discard that person.
Yeah, this idea of contribution is really, really big for threes in relationships. And it can be really good because it encourages people to show up. I think threes can see people's potential probably better than any other type. But if a person isn't, like you said, wired for that or doesn't hold the same value that the three does, then that's gonna get real messy real fast.
Yeah. It can become very harsh when someone makes a mistake.
Yeah.
And when they make a mistake.
Yeah.
because it's an image management, especially when you're in a place that's high stress and you're in high reactivity.
Yeah. One of the things that you and I talked about kind of in preparation for this episode is, and maybe this will be part of what we talk about for each of the types, because I found this so fascinating. As we were talking about, we all want to be loved, obviously, but we all settle for something different.
Yes, absolutely.
And the threes, they want to be loved, but they work to get admiration. And there's a real subtle difference there. Like they're settling for admiration when really they want love.
Right. And there are ways where what we're settling for actually gets in the way of us getting what we need for every type. And in this case, the three, when you're settling for admiration or people being impressed with you, that tends to put a distance between that person and you, where they get like, even if you're so successful, they're tongue-tied, they feel like you're kind of superhuman. And so there's a distance that's very hard to move into intimacy and into like an equality of collaboration because you're so impressive. And the more that you curate that image of being impressive, the less relatable you might seem. Especially for people who are not in everyday relationship with you. And so it actually can get in the way of being able to get the thing that you need, which is a person who loves you regardless of whether you are successful today. And we all need that. But that is one of the real hardships for the three, is that even when they succeed at getting what they're aiming for, which is like, wow, the whole room is so impressed with me.
They're actually not getting what they need.
It can feel like a very lonely win. And it can feel like now I have to keep it up. So the pressure just builds and builds. And some of what you can do when you're in relation, this kind of jumping to like the fourth part. But
well, before you jump to that, I think one of the things that I wanted to like touch on with this piece of admiration is like everyone is on a level playing field, but threes feel like they're down here. Right? Because they're in the heart center, they're dealing with shame, they're dealing with that sadness at the loss of connection. They don't see themselves on this playing field. They see themselves down here. And they're trying to get admiration from people in order to be here, in order to find themselves on level ground. But because they're already here, cultivating this admiration puts them up here, which means you're no longer in a place for a real relationship, right? Like you were talking about that distance, and I think all the things that we go for, like all the things that we're trying to get and we substitute for love, they create a distance. But for threes, it creates this like upward distance. That, like you mentioned, it can be off-putting for other people, and it can increase a sense of pressure and urgency to like keep it up and like, oh, what have they done lately and all of that sort of thing.
Well, even if it's not off-putting for other people, it can feel intimidating to other people. Where they're like, wow, if only I was that cool, but like I can't even touch them. It's interesting because what you're saying is they have a perceived distance that's not true.
And then they create distance.
To solve the perceived distance, they create the distance that then creates essentially the same problem. It just is in the other direction. Yeah.
Man. And we all do that in different ways,
yes.
In different ways around the circle. But I think that was just a really interesting thing to touch on. So we can kind of move into what the work is for 3. So if you're listening to this and you're 3, here are the things that you need to be mindful of and need to be working on when you're in relationship, whether it's friendships, partnerships, marriages.
Yes.
If you're being managed by a boss or you are a manager, any of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things is to actually cultivate and grow your tolerance for failure or for not knowing how to do something, because it is something that creates such reactivity for the 3 that it can be useful to actually look for opportunities to fail at something, to be silly, or when you're experiencing failure, to move toward relationship instead of move towards like image management. But to instead go to someone that you trust and say, I screwed something up today. I'm feeling really raw about it. And to do the work of staying in it, inside of relationship, letting someone see you in a moment where you're not shining. And allow them to love you, to trust that they will stay in relationship with you.
Yeah, that is so huge, because I think a lot of Enneagram teachers will talk about how 3s need to embrace failure. I remember teaching a workshop with somebody and a 3 was in the room and she just looked befuddled at me. She was just like,
but why?
So you're telling me I need to fail? And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, you need to embrace the ways that you have already failed. And this was like, it was so challenging to her. Like, it was so just, she walked away from that workshop probably very upset.
If you were a book, she would have thrown you under the couch.
Exactly. But what I think is so interesting is that so many people talk about how 3s need to embrace failure, you even use the language, look for ways to fail. I think there are a couple things to be mindful of. It's like, there are so many ways in which you've already failed. And I'm not saying this to be a dick. I'm saying this because it's true. And your type has taken those and has shoved them into the closet where no one gets to see them. You don't even get to feel them. And you've separated a part of yourself so that only the shiny parts get seen. And it's not just to embrace failure, right? It's to embrace failure in relationship. Share that with someone. Like what you said was so perfect and so needed for type 3s, because everybody talks about, embrace failure, embrace failure, embrace failure. And I know that there are a ton of 3s who take that and start to look at their failures and start to think about them and start to feel them, but they keep it
in the dark.
Yeah, they keep it in the dark because they're the thing is not just failing for 3s. It's being seen as a failure. And so the relational piece is not only where the majority of your work lies, it's also where you will find the most healing. And it's so important to really stress. I mean, every time we touch in on the heart center, a lot of the work is going to be in relationship. We're talking about relationships for all the types, but 2, 3, 4, y'all don't get much of a choice. Like, your work is like the core of your work is going to happen in relationships. And so I think that that's just so valuable. It's like embracing your failures and letting other people see it. I think another really important way that you can work when you're in relationships is, be willing to kind of bend your value system to allow what other people are bringing to the table to have as much value as what you're bringing to the table. Yes. That's something that is I think that that's a challenge for everyone around the circle, right? Like we overvalue what we bring and we undervalue what others bring. But this is a huge piece for threes, and it's difficult. Like, this is hard work for threes to see the difference as just as valuable as what they're bringing. Because if that's true, then they're no longer impressive.
Right.
Right? Like, that cuts at this need to cultivate admiration and to be seen as impressive. Right. And so really looking at what others are bringing to the table, saying, oh, that's valuable too. That has just as much value as what I'm bringing. And when we can bring both things in collaboration, we're suddenly more equipped. We have more collective intelligence.
Yes.
That's a huge piece for threes.
Yeah, and sometimes when threes come across as like, I need everybody to know my contribution, it's because they want to feel like they're important in the room and that they have significance and sorry, it's too close to the mic and now I lost my track. It sometimes hurts relationship because what makes us impressive sometimes is that sense of humility and that sense of being able to lift up someone else and say and appreciate the contribution of someone else and let someone else be the star. Yeah. And that is actually very hard work for high capacity threes. Yeah. To take a back seat on behalf of another person. But the ability to do that on its own is impressive. Yeah. You know, so it's good work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving into how we can be supportive of the threes in our lives. You have some really close threes in your lives. And I'm curious, like, what insight you have in cultivating these, like, strong relationships with threes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Two of my favorite people are threes. And one of the things that I'm aware of as a person who studies the Enneagram is I want to create a place where it is safe for them to be normal, unimpressive, broken, have screwed something up. And so to take it lightly, to like laugh, to dance it out. I recently kind of walked through something with one of my friends who's a 3 where something that they didn't go as well as they would have hoped.
AKA they failed.
Well, I'm not going to say that.
I think it's helpful sometimes to use that language, though. and like, you don't have to use it in this situation because I know what you're talking about. But I think it's helpful to like, one ways we can be supportive to threes is to help them become desensitized to the word failure. Like, we can call it a failure. And I think to some degree, everyone in our society is a little touchy around that word. For sure. Because we have a lot of 3 qualities in our culture.
Especially in Western culture.
Yeah, so 3-ish. And so being able to use the word failure and just call it a failure and let it be okay, I think is really supportive and helpful. Yeah,
and I think in this case, while I might not choose that word, but I would say there were some people who were very loudly unimpressed.
Yes.
So I won't go so far as this. Like, I think sometimes people are really unimpressed and we didn't fail. They just they had a big reactivity to it. Yeah. And I sat with this person this weekend and I just wanted to make space to say I was so impressed with how you handled that. And your willingness to step into that and talk about it and receive feedback with such humility. I mean, I was just like awestruck by the work that went in to the way this person received that feedback and offered it up to help us figure out, like, how can we respond to this in the future? How can we make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen in the future? In the community that we're in together. And so I think one way that you can support a 3 is not only by making space for them to be vulnerable and messy, but also when they are able to engage failure with wisdom, to like really be impressed by that. You know, and say, like, holy shit, you were incredible in that meeting. I don't know how you stayed in that for so long, you know, because I know that was work. And so I think creating those spaces of safety is one of the primary ways.
Yeah, and we're gonna see how this idea of creating a space that is safe is really going to it's going to be present, and it's going to be part of the supportive work for all the types.
Yeah.
It's just we're creating safety around a specific issue. And for threes, it is this idea of being a failure, of being unimpressive, of being mundane or normal or right. All of these things that they just, because they see themselves down here, normal isn't enough. Like, okay isn't enough. They feel as though they need more. And I just want to highlight in that moment, one of the advantages that threes can bring to the relationships. We'll take it all the way back to the beginning. Because even in that situation, you're talking about the safety that this community has created for this person. And because of that, they were able to really embody more of the 6 energy.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, let's go into troubleshooting mode, and let's make sure that, like, you know, if I'm going to fail, let's make sure that other people in the future succeed. Like, let's build some strategy, and let's kind of do some forecasting to see how we can make it to where it's not me failing, it's the community succeeding. And that's so powerful. And I think that's really, really, that's a huge gift that threes can bring when they're experiencing relationship in that safe place. And it doesn't matter how safe a place you build, a 3 doesn't have to, might not feel safe, and, you know, that's their own work. But, you know, there is something about, like what you said, being supportive and, like, calling out how they've done good work. And, you know, one of the things that I actually counseled a client on, in, like, supporting a 3 that was in their life was, like, you know, sometimes we gotta throw 3s a bone.
Yeah. Like,
and this is one of many reasons why one of my relationships with a 3 definitely failed, is that I was in a place as an 8 where I was unwilling to throw a 3 a bone. I was like, I don't care about those things. And the undertone of that was always, you're stupid for caring about those things. Right? And obviously you can see why that relationship didn't work out. But there is something
always easier in hindsight.
Yeah, always easier in hindsight. But you can see how, like, sometimes throwing 3s a bone in, like, you know, when we're supporting people in their work, it's not always just making it hard for them.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes supporting people in their work is, like, going along with them. So, like, maybe you have a night where you get real fancy and dressed up, where they get to wear their, like, most whatever like outrageous outfit and go to some fancy dinner. Like, okay, give them a safe and healthy outlet for this energy. That if not given a safe and healthy outlet, will go into other places and screw stuff up. You know, like, so if it's, you know, about being impressive or being successful, like, take them to an arcade and let them beat you at air hockey, you know, like, give them, you know, like, or maybe you're not good at
letting someone beat you at anything.
No, it doesn't work for 8s. That specific. And also, you shouldn't let a 3 win. A 3 wants to win on their own, blah, blah, blah. But you get where I'm going with this, is, like, there are ways in which we can throw a 3 a bone and help them have a healthy outlet, because so often, especially in our culture, we really demonize the 3.
We really do.
It's a real problem. And so this energy...
And then we expect everything that 3s bring.
Yeah, we, like, expect you to do all the things, and then we're going to demonize you for doing all the things and tell you that you have to grow, but not give you the space to do that.
Right, because we don't want you to stop succeeding. We're benefiting from your success.
Yeah, and we all... And it's because we're all...
capitalism.
And we all have our own internalized 3 stuff because of capitalism, because of, you know, the culture that we live in. And so it can be hard to create space for the 3. And so, you know, throwing them a bone, giving them space to express this in a healthy and welcoming way, I think will go a really long way for 3s. And that's one way that they know that they're safe, right? Like, that there are so many places where we say that it's safe for 3s to show up as they are, but we don't want them to be too successful, right? It's not safe for them to succeed because, that's them playing into their type or whatever. And a safe place for 3s is a place where they can, it's a place where they can fail and a place where they can succeed in equal measure.
Yes.
And so that's That's my word on
Yeah.
threes as I look back at my own relationship in hindsight and be like, oh, this is what I didn't do well. So
yeah, and
learn from my mistakes.
I will just add to that, you know, a lot of times when we talk about threes in past tense, like how do you deal with that you've failed or you already have failed at things because you're a human being. But there's also a lot of stress for a three who's trying to succeed at something.
Yeah.
And it's undetermined whether it's failure or not.
Yeah.
You know, and I think one thing that we can do is not belittle their drive for success. And especially if we are benefiting from their drive for success, which when we're in strong relationship with a three, you almost always are.
Yeah.
They do a lot of things well.
Yeah.
And you can ride those coattails and then later be like, well, you're a workaholic, or why do you care about that?
Yeah.
You only care about image while you have benefited from all of the things that they do with excellence. And I think threes get a lot of crap for caring too much about work or about competition or, you know, whatever. And so when you're in a relationship, especially when tensions fly, it's an easy place to weaponize and belittle and be disrespectful and act like they're stupid because of their typology. And you can do that for all the types, but with threes to like really say like, okay, you're clearly really stressed. Is there a way that I could help you succeed? Like, can I, is there anything I could do that would help take some of the stress off of you?
Yeah.
Is such a kindness for a three because you're saying like, yes, I know this is important to you. What could I do that would help?
Yeah.
And I have a friend one of my very best friends is a three. And when she is in that space, her husband will often go and run her a bath without even asking and be like, I ran you a bath. I think you need to take a break. Just 15 minutes. And it's something they've agreed upon, so it's not like patronizing. But they know sometimes she gets into the spin, and instead of him being like, "Stop spinning, it's stupid," he is going, we have determined that this is something that's helpful to you. So I went ahead and just did it, and it's you know they've agreed upon it. But I think it's just so sweet as someone who just gets to kind of see some of the ways that they care for each other, and what would happen differently if he was like, you care too much about that.
Yeah.
Now you're in a fight versus something that's coming alongside.
Yeah. You know, we've talked a lot about threes and failure and success and how we support them in these aspects. And I want to go one level deeper with this like idea of how we support threes.
Yeah, let's do it.
And really it's focusing on this idea around the fact that threes, they have a tendency to believe their own hype. and then by tendency I mean they do it all the time, almost exclusively. But what that can do is it creates a space where they don't really know the truth about themselves, and that doesn't have to be a hard thing or a bad thing, but they believe the image so much so that they don't have an idea of like a grounded, constant self, because the image is always changing. And so, you know, asking a three what they really want and creating space for, and we'll find on this first triangle, 3, 6, and 9 have a lot of trouble getting to what they want, getting to what's really them. Because this, you know, being like, I call it the Bermuda Triangle of the Enneagram, you know, something got lost. And it's a key part of who they are. And so creating a lot of space for a three to kind of do that exploration, because there's no winning or losing in it, right? And so threes can be less inclined to do it because there's not a clear payoff, like a lot of other things in the outside world. But like giving threes the space to figure out and understand who they are behind the image. And that can look a lot of different ways, but I feel like that's a big piece of like opening up a three to real deep growth and development. And like, if all you're believing is the image, then it's going to be hard to disengage from your desire for success and to be impressive and all those things. But when you have a sense of who you really are deep down, the embracing of failure, the letting go of this like unhealthy ambition, not that all ambition is healthy, unhealthy, but right, this
Yeah.
like drive that's killing other relationships or whatever it has, you can let those things go so much easier when you have this stronger sense of who you are. And so, you know, we can see the hype, and we can acknowledge the hype, we can acknowledge the image and be like, yeah, that's great. And what's behind that?
Yeah.
Like, I want to get to know what's behind that as well. Like, I don't want to just stop at the image.
Right. And it's not like a tearing down of the image.
No.
It's actually like a moving beyond it.
Yeah.
You know, so that you're able to say, like, I appreciate everything that I can see, but I really do want to know you.
It's a yes and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Good stuff.
Yep.
Well, that about wraps up our time on threes.
Yes, absolutely.
A
good start.
Good start. I like starting with threes. Threes have a lot of like generative energy.
Yes,
it's very good. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to drop a comment down below.
Yes.
Let us know about the threes in your life, or if you are a three, let us know. How do we do? Don't forget to subscribe so that you know when all the new episodes are coming out. Hit that notification bell. You can find all of my work at consciousenneagram.com. If you're interested and you want some direct coaching because you've got a three in your life, or you are a three in your life, and
you are a three in your life,
you need some help, or you just want to take a more active role in your development, be sure to get in touch with me there. And Kim, where can we find all your info?
Yeah, you can find me at kimberlyandcoach.com. And if you are looking for team dynamics or group kind of work in your corporate environment or church or anything like that, that is where we tend to live, is in that team and leadership coaching.
Yeah. All the links are down in the description. Again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see y'all in the next one.
Cheers.